It's 11 minutes after 8 p.m. You tuned in to Metrofm Talk here on the Mighty Metro. And we continue as we waited out just a few more hours, just over about 3 hours or so before the nation goes into a 21-day lockdown in response to the novel COVID-19, novel coronavirus. I'd love to hear your perspectives. Many of you might be feeling very uncertain, feeling quite anxious. You might have gone earlier on today to go and get some last-minute buys. What is it about that certainly unsettled you? I had an opportunity to do some last-minute buying earlier on this afternoon, and I must tell you, it was probably one of the most unpleasant experiences I've had in the last while. Very, very unpleasant. Talk about social distancing, but then you go into one of our retailers over the last day or so, and that is practically impossible. Not to say, of course, how little one would find on the shelves, and I had an opportunity to speak to many of the tellers today, and how many of the trucks had come through to deliver. Might be anything from liquor right through to day-to-day food supplies, and in at least two of the three retailers I went to, I was told that supply trucks had come more than twice in the day. Now, that should speak volumes about the surge in demand that we have, in the context of deliveries being dropped off maybe once a day and or maybe sort of twice a day, now happening 3 or more times a day. I'd love to hear your perspectives. Do share those with us. Give us a ring, 089 110 3377, 089 110 3377. We're going to be taking a look at the psychosocial impacts of the isolation that comes with the lockdown, the social distancing, because indeed, as people, we are social creatures and social beings, and what happens in a context like this, and more importantly, how best do we manage the anxiety and uncertainty and some of the psychosocial issues that come with the isolation that is part and parcel of this lockdown. Tlaka joins me now on the line, clinical psychologist. Good evening to you, Thabang, and welcome to Metro FM Talk.
Good evening, Ayabonga, and all the Metro FM listeners.
Thabang, let's maybe start off here. I guess I was trying to paint a picture here of how uncharacteristic the behavior of many South Africans has been over the last day or so. And that quick step change in behaviors in the context that we have. And of course, a lot of people being uncertain, anxious and scared about the spread of this can have widespread psychosocial impacts. What are some of those that you've been able to observe and that many of us should anticipate as we go into this lockdown in the next few hours?
Many of us South Africans haven't actually been here, so at least our generation hasn't faced something like this before. So it is understandable that people might panic, that the anxiety levels might be up, because people are worried about things like, will we have enough food? Will I be able to cope? People are worried about work. So there's a lot of uncertainty because this is uncharted territory, and so people don't know exactly how to respond to it. So we haven't been trained. So that's why we see, I suppose, the panic buying. So we see questions about then whether we'll cope, whether we'll fight, whether there'll be abuse in the house. So a lot of people are wondering, how is this actually going to happen? But it is understandable because it's something new for all of us, and we are all learning together.
Mm-hmm. What about this moment would trigger feelings of anxiety or maybe any other underlying psychosocial conditions that people might have? What about this moment? What about the restrictions in mobility and I guess in how we undertake our day-to-day lives? What about those changes makes this particular moment, I guess, not only a trigger, but maybe one where these kind of feelings and emotions would peak?
Yes, because, human beings, what allows us to go from day to day is that we've got a certain routine, our brains have a certain schema. We understand how the week generally goes, how the day generally goes. You have a certain pattern that you usually follow, and that usually allows you to calm down, allows you to plan. Now, you find yourself in a situation where you have to be isolated, so that's something new for you. And so that's triggering in the sense that you don't know exactly how you will cope. How will you cope with morning, with your afternoons, with your evenings? How will you cope with the relationships? Will you cope just being in a secluded space? Will you cope with the resources? So the fact that this is uncertain and this is new for us, and we haven't had this drill. You see, if we had a drill before, we had drills about how to go into quarantine, social distance. So if we had that sort of experience, we'd cope well with it. But because it's new, this is very triggering for us. But I do imagine that as the days go by, people are going to surprise themselves. They're going to surprise themselves in the sense that they'll be able to find things to do. The nerves will be settled, and it's anxiety-provoking now. But as people start getting into a routine, I think people will settle down a bit.
No, definitely. And if you just joined us, you tuned into Metro FM Talk here. I'm in conversation with Thabang Tlaka. We're speaking about the psychosocial dimensions of this lockdown and how we go about surviving this lockdown. I'd love to hear from you. Do share with us some of your own experiences and some of the things that are certainly settling you at this point in time. It might be anxiety emerging from your experiences and seeing hordes of panic buying in many of our retailers. It might be something entirely different. I mean, the fact of the matter is that you have no right to leave your home for the next 21 days or so. And it's certainly very uncharacteristic of how, as people, we live our lives, and that's certainly going to have a very disruptive impact on the psychosocial dimensions on many of our host households. But Thabang, I guess the other dimension here is this an opportunity for families who, because of the rigors of the workplace and the demands of that, are sometimes unable to spend adequate time with each other? Is this an opportunity now, to bond and to be able to, break through, some of the difficulties that come with not being able to engage as frequently as one would like because of work and other obligations?
Certainly, there's a lot of ambivalent feelings. Other people, they see this as a traumatic time, but certainly some relationships are going to be mended, because for the first time, people are actually going to get to sit down and talk to their spouses, reconnect, rekindle that fire, talk about important things. For the first time, people are going to have to sit with their children and interact with their children. People are going to have to sit with themselves and think about who they are and what really matters now, because the situation allows us to reflect on what priorities are. So I do believe that there will be some benefit in the sense that the time has slowed down, which will allow us to reconnect with something. And the other part is that maybe some issues that haven't been dealt with, some difficult situations might come up, yes, and people might be worried about how they're going to address those.
Talking about those difficult situations, I mean, I remember having a conversation with Russell Rensburg from the Rural Health Advocacy Project. And one of the things he was talking to, I guess, in the same vein as these tough and difficult conversations that you refer to, is the prospect of much higher levels of gender-based violence and violence against children during this period. Certainly from your own observations, do you get a sense that that might happen and that we ought to anticipate that? And if so, how do we respond?
We do know that when people are in confined spaces, there might be some irritations, struggle with cabin fever, people struggle to be in small spaces and how they relate. But the other things that compound gender-based violence is things like alcohol. When people drink, then people then tend to abuse. We do also find that when those are limited, then the violence is also reduced. So we will see a picture of that. We'll see a flaring up of some sort of arguments, difficulties, and it's wonderful that the government has given, I suppose, numbers that people can call. But I do also expect that the fights we expect, what we think will happen, won't necessarily happen in that sense, because there are other contributing factors, like the fact that somebody went out, they went drinking, because a lot of people who abuse are not necessarily sober at that point. There's some level that alcohol plays in that. So if you're in a home where perhaps somebody's drinking, then that might be a bit of a problem. But the fact that people can't go out, come back late, stab each other, get in accidents, so that might help families and might help people actually get to face real issues in a civil and orderly way.
Okay, and I guess, in that vein, because I think the picture that you're trying to paint is that there is potential vulnerability to one risk, which might be on the GBV side of things, as we've seen when people are confined to a space. But then on the other side, there's also the potential of probably not hearing the sordid news that often comes from the end of a weekend where people have been stabbed and, shot and arrested and all manner of other things. Just before we let you go, Thabang, I mean, if there's any message you would have to any of our listeners here who might be battling with, all the uncertainty and the anxiety that comes with a moment like this, which is certainly unprecedented for many of us in our generation, what would that message be?
A lockdown is there for a specific reason. We are being locked down because if we don't do something, potentially worse will happen, which is that the infection might rise, people might not have hospitals to go to, and people might die. So being at home lockdown for 21 days, there's the potential situations where hundreds of thousands of people could die. So we need to think about that. Yes, we sacrifice a couple of days, but it is a good thing because it's for a good cause. So if we can pull together, try to remain calm, get the facts, do what we need to do so that as a country, as a world, we can survive together. So we are helping each other by doing this lockdown. It's not a form of punishment. We're doing this because we want to help. And I think if our minds can shift that we're doing this as a loving act to help people survive, I think we might then cope with it a bit better.
Awesome stuff. Thank you very much, Thabang. Really appreciate you coming on the show this evening and sharing some of your insights with us. Thabang Tlaka, a clinical psychologist, joining us there on the line. I'd love to hear your perspectives and, of course, how all of us are feeling this evening. Give us a ring, 089 110 3377. Let's take this brief break. On the other side, we catch up with the Armed Forces, South African National Defence Force, and they've made it clear there's no scope, skit, or any happening.